So we're at 12:01. We will go ahead and get us kicked off here. First and foremost, thank you for joining. To make sure you're in the right place, this is the Coffee and Copilot demo session with Infused Innovations. Alex and I have been doing these for quite some time for organizations, and one of the things we run into on a fairly consistent basis because everything is changing so fast in this particular technology, but also within the Microsoft ecosystem, that even if you saw it a year ago, things have changed. The advancements have come through within the Microsoft portfolio, and where there may have been either challenges, deficiencies, or maybe things that didn't work the way that you wanted them to. Things have definitely changed quite a bit over the past 6 to 9 months. So we thought it would be a great opportunity to kind of get a small group together, share with you kind of what Microsoft 365 Copilot looks like today, what you kind of get with it. We're going to talk through, and Alex will go through in the demo kind of a tour of what it looks like, just in case you're new to it. In fact, let me ask you to participate right here out of the gate. If you could in the chat, just let me know if you're brand new to Microsoft 365 Copilot, if you're an intermediate user, or if you've been using it kind of like forever, so we can kind of get a sense of that, and we can tailor the level of kind of what we're showing here to you. But where this is purposefully small for the reason being that there are always questions, right? And when you get into some of the bigger sessions, the bigger webinars, you don't always get a chance to ask your questions or get them answered. So whether it's about what Alex is going to show you, Alex is also incredibly, and I'll share the link here with the group. He actually put out an incredible blog recently in terms about all the different Microsoft Copilots. So he's up to speed on, I'll say up to speed because Microsoft's new year and it may change within the next 30 days, so who knows. But if you have questions about subscriptions, is my point, feel free to ask those as well. But without further ado, I'm going to look through the chat in just a second. Alex, I'm going to turn it over to you, and we'll start going through the demo. But if we're going through it, just raise your hand. There's a little raise your hand tool on the in Teams here. Alex, I'll keep an eye out for those, and we'll give folks a chance to ask questions along the way here as well.
Cool. Sounds good. And then just on questions, there is no such thing as a stupid question, especially with this kind of tooling, because you can get very far very fast without having to understand all the basics. So it's very easy to have gaps and whatnot. And the only way to find those gaps are by, asking the stupid questions. I've asked plenty of them myself, so don't be afraid.
Alex, and just so you know, it looks like about half of the folks are new users as well. So
cool. Okay, so I'll start off with, this is the landing screen for Microsoft 365 Copilot. This is what I call the premium Copilot. As you can see here next to my name in the bottom left, it says premium. If you don't have the licensing, it'll say basic there, and that one is much more limited. We're going to be talking about the premium features today for the most part. So basic view, and then if you go to like portal.microsoft.com or the m365.cloud.microsoft, it lands you in this chat window. Sure, if any of you use Microsoft 365, you've seen this before, because it tries to force you there constantly. Starting with the basics, so left-hand pane here, you got the new chat. That's just starting a new chat, pretty self-explanatory. This search button is actually kind of handy, and there's some differences between the new chat, but this is essentially organizational AI search. So you can ask questions in the chat and it does a search and can pull that information back. But if you want to do just like a straight search, find data, and then not kind of conversate with it, that's what this search option's for. But let's do a more plain text search than the old style, like hope you match keyword stuff. Library, this is just anything that you have created with, since I created with Copilot, any Copilot native things you've made. And by that, I mean there's a tool called Copilot Pages, which is kind of like Word, but it's Copilot native. It works with them better. And then if you use the image generation, they show up under the Images tab. And then that's just anything you've ever made with Copilot there. This tasks thing is actually new. So you can ask, give it tasks, jobs, whatever, it goes off and does them. If you want to keep an eye on it because you have multiple tasks running, they added a task pane to it. I literally just saw this today, so you may not have this yet. I think Microsoft's just rolling it out. Notebooks I'll touch on, but these are essentially a spot where you kind of can collect chats and documents together and have like a working space over multiple things that's kind of durable rather than chats, which tend to be like one-off jobs. They can also be expanded into what's called a Copilot notebook, OneNote. It's like Copilot mixed with OneNote. Microsoft's been changing it a lot recently. The other big thing with this is where if you're working on stuff with Copilot with other people, notebooks are kind of that collaborative place where you can share the notebook itself with others and then kind of talk, like cooperatively talk with it and work together on it, as well as there's a bunch of other stuff I'll try and touch on with that. And then the agents, I'll go into agents more in depth, but they're like specialized chats almost where you give them access to a certain instruction set / system prompt, specify what tools and reference data you want to have, and then use them for specialized kind of tasks or jobs or that kind of stuff. Okay. The other big thing is chat settings up here. Anything in here are shared prompts. This is newish, but basically you can, if you send a message to Copilot, you can share the prompt with other people, which lets them quickly get to it and use it. I honestly haven't used it beyond 2 test prompts, but that does exist. But if you ever want to unshare them, that's in there, kind of hidden to get to. And then most importantly, personalization. So you have custom instructions in here. This is where if you want to tailor it to act a certain way across all chats you have with it, you can put those specific instructions in here. And then this is kept in its system prompt / instruction set that is pushed to it as part of every chat. So if I have a certain way I want every response to be like in my language, or I want to tailor it to me being an IT person, I could put some stuff in here and then it would be aware of that every time I message it and then use that to tailor its response. Work profile. This is, you can't really do anything with this, but this just shows you what it's pulling in. So it knows that my job title is solutions engineers to inform itself who my boss is if I ask stuff about that, and then who is my boss's boss as well. That's the CEO. So when I ask certain questions, it can tailor its response depending on what I need, or if I tell it to go do something like go send this to my manager, it can automatically pull that without me having to specify Connor's my manager and then do the thing I asked for. The other big one is saved memories. So this one doesn't automatically populate, but saved memories are kind of like a quick hit list of things it can access that it knows about you or infers from conversations it's had with you. It doesn't build memories automatically though. The way that works is if you're doing something and you want it to remember whatever you were doing in some way, you just tell it save memory or save this as a memory, and then it will add it in there. I personally am not a fan of them because I like the context is very important with this stuff, and I like to be very aware of what's getting pulled into mine. Some people really like it though, so play around with it and whatnot. These tools are very customizable, so everyone uses them slightly differently. The only one I have in here is this basically high-level overview. I had a poll of everything I do within the organization and a lot of the basic tools I use, so I didn't have to repeat them constantly and give it a rundown on everything. So I have that available instead of again me having to copy and paste what I do all day, or try and have it repeatedly infer it. I know exactly what it'll infer from the memory because that was pre-built. And then you can turn web search on and off at the user level. I generally don't touch this. I just leave it on. There's a couple other things in here, but they're pretty basic or things you don't really ever touch, like what kind of sources you want available, other ones you can pull in at like a high level kind of stuff. So you can dig around in there. There's always new stuff being added in there. One, or I should say 2 other big things is you can do temporary chats in here as well. If you click that, it basically a chat that doesn't show up in your chat history down here. From a corporate level, fair warning, they do still, like, the chats get logged on the back end, so they're hard to get to from an IT/admin perspective. You got to go through multiple gates of permissions and approvals, but it's not like it's a completely anonymous deletes itself all across the board. Temporary chat, it's more a, you want to do a one-off question that's not filling up your chat log kind of stuff. That's the main purpose of the temporary chats there. And then this little green shield here that says enterprise data protections apply to this chat. And this one goes for the entire Copilot ecosystem. If you see that shield, it means that you are logged into your company Microsoft 365 account, and anything you are sending to it is covered by your Microsoft data agreement, basically saying that the data will be private, kept to your organization. Microsoft won't use it for anything else. The big reason that's important to look for is there's some personal copilots from Microsoft. So if you go to the wrong one and you don't sign in, there is a chance you're talking to a personal one. It's a lot harder to do these days, but just be aware of that. Look for that shield when you're using the different copilots. Okay, actually using this thing. So chat box, you can also do dictation where you just text or speech to text, click that button, talk, and then it will transcribe it. Or you can actually do a full voice chat, which is where you can have that conversational back and forth with it. I personally don't use the voice chat stuff very often because it's not a way I work. I think you do a lot more than I do, Phil. But it
Yeah, I
has
do. It's
like all the
even the speech to text for me anyways, as you're trying to give it context, I find that easier. That's just the way I work though.
Yeah, like I said, everyone works differently, and these tools can be very personalized. So it's a good option of like if you just want to sit there and literally just work, string of words right into the thing, you can do that, and then you'll get a result out of there, and then it will respond to you, and you can talk back and forth like you're talking to someone. Not quite to that level, but it's pretty close. There's also this little plus icon here. So when you hit this, you can come in and then either attach cloud files. There's 3 different ways to attach files. Cloud files just lets you pull things from your OneDrive or your SharePoint here on the left and then add it in for context. You can also upload things locally or add work content, which is kind of like add cloud files, but more extensive. Add work content lets you do files, but you can also tag people. So if I'm working with Phil on something, I might tag Phil in this chat. It doesn't notify him, but it tells Copilot that I am interacting with Phil in some way as part of this, and to pull basically his work info. So it'll pull his job title, email address, contact info, and then that can help inform it or give it the information that's needed there. You
Hey,
can
Alex.
also, yep.
Yeah, a question came in on, and I think where you're talking about the files, I think this is an appropriate place to ask it. Where does Copilot break, or does it have issues when sensitivity labels, DLP policies, and things that they have are strict? And talk about how that kind of works when Copilot's out there. You're asking a question or prompting it, and how does it go back and take a look, and how do those policies and labels fit into it?
Yeah. So that all ties back into kind of a permissions perspective. So from the perspective of sensitivity labels and DLP and permissions, Copilot will only have access to what the user has access to. So if there is a document that, say, lives in a SharePoint site that I have access to, but it has a high level confidentiality label on it that locks down access to only certain people, and I'm not on that list, I can't get access to it through Copilot because I don't have access to it. Same with DLP policies. If it gets blocked in some way that me, Alex, would have gotten blocked using any other platform, Copilot will also get blocked. There's DLP policies. These are newer, specific for Copilot to control like leakage of data through Copilot, and those will just get flagged based on the settings on those of like stopping it from using web search, or if it detects that you're using it like unethically or for certain use cases or that kind of stuff, it'll kick in. So yeah, basically it's just follows your permissions and then your settings pretty well. It doesn't give anyone additional access. With that said, if you don't have good access controls in place or you
Yeah.
haven't audited it in a while, it is very easy to expose stuff that no one knew they had access to. Like if someone did a share with the whole organization link at one point on a payroll Excel sheet or something, but nobody else in the organization knew about it because they didn't have the specific link, Copilot could surface that. There are some pre-canned reports in the admin side of SharePoint that let you find that pretty easily, though. It's more on the admin side, though. And then the document changes. So for documents updating, it will pull up-to-date information from the documents to some, well, I shouldn't say that to some extent. There is a delay on the regular chat in here when you update it. It's usually not that long. It's just the index has to update. There's like a whole tenant index for search and everything. So there can be a delay on that side. If you're working out of like a Word or an Excel document, though, and you use the Copilot window in there, it pulling live data out of that sheet, so you don't have to worry about it updating. And then from the Copilot memories perspective, I mentioned you could, if you told it to save certain data as a memory that's protected by a sensitivity label or a DLP policy. I honestly haven't tested it, but thinking through how that would work, because the user has access to it, it would let them basically save that data as a memory in Copilot. Of course, that memory would be restricted to the user, but because they had access, they can basically do whatever with it as far as Copilot is concerned, within reason. If they try to do something that is going to get flagged by a DLP policy, that'll get blocked. But
Awesome. Thank you, Alex.
no problem. All right. And then other work content you can add. Another question pop in. We're working with
GCC.
a GCC tenant. How far behind are we compared to a commercial tenant? I don't know specifically. Generally, because it depends on feature. I have seen the non-commercial tenants. This goes for both academic and GCC and GCC high. They are anywhere from 6 to 3 months behind usually, but it's varied quite a bit on the features. Sometimes things seem to hit right away. Sometimes things take forever to go in. I haven't noticed a rhyme or reason to like why, or sorry, I should say which ones differentiate. So it just kind of look it up per feature kind of thing. Okay, so from adding work content, you can also tag specific meetings. So that pulls in the meeting attendees, the meeting agenda, and then the meeting transcript if that's available. So it can also, all this stuff it can go out and find on its own without you having to specifically tag it. This is just if you want to very finely ground it on something. Like for some of my reoccurring meetings, I could tell it to go find the team meeting transcripts, but if I wanted to grab a specific team meeting transcript, I could come into this view and then go through the meeting series and then tag that specific one. Same with emails. So you can just tag a specific email, Teams chats, channels, SharePoint sites, and then Power Other is everything. For us, that's Power BI reports. So if you use Power BI, you can tag a dashboard and just chat over the data in there. So you can go pretty far. You also don't have to use the plus there. So you can also in here just hit / and it pulls up that same view here. And then you can just type Bob because I want to reference Bob. So you can get pretty quick with using this stuff, so you don't have to click around a bunch. All right. Big thing on the basic chat interface. I'm going to jump in the agents here if no one has any questions on that. And if you do have questions after I jump into agents, feel free to ask and I can jump back really quick. Okay. So agents are, again, basically a prompt that steers it on how to behave, plus some tools and some guidance on behaviors for the goal of specific capabilities or performing specific tasks. With Copilot, you can go directly to an agent. Over here on the left-hand side, I have a few pinned. There's this agent viewer here where you can click agents. You can see the high-level overview of all the agents I have access to. These are ones I've selected. There's a bunch of them in here that are built by Microsoft that you can use. A couple of them are Frontier, fair warning, those break sometimes. The ones that have been built by us and published in Copilot Studio or other parts of the platform for the whole company to use, these are usually more advanced ones to tie in the third-party platforms. And then if you use like other third-party platforms that support Copilot out of the box, there's a massive list of agents you can go find. So there's a lot of stuff in here to pull from. You can also, this is new-ish. This is similar to the tasks thing, but you can poke in and see how your agents are doing and that kind of stuff. But we'll say I want to create a specific agent for a specific use case. I can hit create agent there, and then there's some pre-made templates I can use. I can view my existing agents, or I can use this agent builder to create a new one with plain text, type into it, or hit skip to go right into the advanced builder. I already have one queued up here, but to give an overview of what I did, I went into the agents, new agent, and then this text box here where it says message agent builder. This is what I had put in there. The goal here was, I'll read it out loud. I need to build an agent that helps employees perform an initial classification of business purchases. The goal is to classify it as either a capital expenditure, operating expense, or if it needs finance review. Gave it some instructions on what each response should provide. And then I also told it that I was going to be providing our internal procurement policy as an attached document, so I was aware I was going to do that. And then the name of that said document, so I could reference that in the system instructions. So it went out, built this whole thing for me, and then gave me a response here. Collapse this. So it's got the instruction set that gave it the overview of what I wanted, general guidelines on how to speak, the required output that every request should come with, and then it's step-by-step instructions as well as some overview on what skills it has. With these things, part of it's just, working with AI. It doesn't necessarily know what all it can do, so sometimes you have to kick it along or specify what it can do so it knows that it can do it. Examples are always very powerful with agents and really everything with these if you want it to behave in a specific way. And then just so this is the example request, example response, and then instructions for feedback and follow-up. Also, if you're wondering what all these random asterisks and pound signs are and everything, how to describe this, the language that AI is used to for formatting and that stuff is this thing called Markdown, and that's Markdown formatting. So very useful to read up on even just high-level Markdown and then have it teach you some basics. But that's what that is. It helps structure it. Like this little pound sign is putting in a header for this field, and then the double asterisks on the outsides are bolding, which tells it to highlight it. It understands somewhat in the same way we do. So things that get certain formatting get prioritized in how it understands things. Okay. Knowledge. So agents can also have knowledge sources. You can add, again, all that stuff I showed in the work content, as well as you can add in websites. You can just type in the website here, and it adds it as a knowledge source. I wouldn't use Google because it's going to pull the things off the Google homepage, which is a search screen. But if you have like a specific public-facing knowledge base or blog article or that kind of thing, you could do that in here. That, like, an example I could do is that every Microsoft Copilot for Business blog article from us, if you didn't want to read that colossal thing because it is massive, you could just add it as a website in an agent and then ask it questions. It would search over that whole blog and then answer your question about the different Copilots available. So that kind of stuff. You can also tell it whether or not it has general internet access or specific internet access. So again, I'll hammer this home. Context is very important. These things are kind of like eager toddlers, and they can get very distracted very easily. So you do want to keep it narrowed to some extent. But again, you gotta just play around with it and figure out which one works right for your use case. For this one, I don't want it going off and searching the internet for anything. And I only want it to use the sources I specified. I also don't want it to go off and search other internal data for this one, only what I provide it, which is the prompt and the procurement policy here, which I had added as a Word document from my OneDrive here. And then I can also set the capabilities if I want to create documents, charts, code, that kind of stuff. For this, I almost always turn these on. The main reason you want to turn it off is, again, that context thing. The more stuff you give it, the more confused it tends to get. I've never noticed an issue with it going off and using the tools unexpectedly so far, because this isn't that an extensive amount of tools. So no issues. Do turn it off, though, if you're noticing issues of it, like goes off and creates a bunch of Word documents without you asking it to. So those are options in there. And then suggested prompts. So this is more if you're sharing this out with other people, or you just want to remember how your agent you built 6 months ago is used. You can add suggested prompts here that kind of give hints on what this thing is for. But I'll go and hit create. Oh, there's also, a name. I didn't add a picture for this one. You can use the AI image generator to build pictures. And then there's also a description to give an overview of what this thing is. I always add descriptions just because these things, you can AI generate a description from your request pretty quickly, and it helps, one, you remember what this thing was for, helps tell other people what it was for. And the way things are moving, the capabilities aren't there yet, but a lot of stuff is moving into kind of an like agent swarm view, and that's where you can have agents use other agents, and part of getting them to be able to do that well is having the descriptions so they know what those other agents do. So if you do that in advance, you don't have to go back and do all this stuff when those features start rolling out. I mean, no timeline, that's just more where the industry's been moving with that stuff.
Alex, any thoughts or recommendations on how specific or how general you should make an agent?
That is a hard one to answer. The way I usually do it is similar, basically this agent builder here style stuff, where I just tell it what I want to do, and then I take whatever system prompt it's made there. There's also a prompt coach agent available for doing that kind of stuff, where I put basically what I'm trying to accomplish, get the prompt out, and then I use that one. If I notice it's working well, but not as well as I want, that's where I start getting more specific and looking at like the prompt engineering guides from Microsoft. But I generally just start with like the basic stuff and see if it seems like it's going to be useful or not, and then refine from there. If you get too specific, you can invest a lot of time up front, and then it can be a huge waste if you don't suss it out first.
This is a great, for those who haven't used this before, I think the prompt coach, and also you can do it, I think, in the agent builder as well. But if you hit that microphone button, right, you can do the speech to text with that component of it. Like I'll use that because I like to give context with what I'm asking for. And rather than me thinking through exactly how I need to architect or build a specific prompt for the instructions, I'll just talk through, here's what I want at the end of the day, and it will output something that's useful. And then you can obviously modify and tweak that as you go forward. But I think that's useful that way.
Yep. And that goes for not just prompt building in the entire Copilot ecosystem. You can, like, if you ever have any questions on how to use any of this, you can literally ask Copilot. Sometimes you might have to build for some of the more specific stuff. You may have to build an agent or give it access to like a specific Microsoft documentation article on that feature. But you can, again, just like ask back and forth on what you're trying to do, and it can help kind of collaboratively do that with you.
So I think that's good from hopefully that's a good background for everyone on the kind of the back end side of it. If there's any questions, by all means, do we think of it like an advanced GPT or a GPT that can do more things than a GPT? I think that's a good way to initially think about it. If you're looking at the GPTs, that's probably a really good way to start. But I think you can do, Alex, you'd agree you can do more with it than just your typical GPT.
Yep. The GPTs have a very similar feature set, but within the ChatGPT system, the big advantage with these agents is they can tie into all of your Microsoft stuff where all your data lives and whatnot. So yeah, pretty much advanced GPT.
Yeah. Awesome.
We're not going into it today, but you can also push these into Copilot Studio, which is the far more advanced agent builder system as well. So you can start basic and then really build up to your advanced use cases that go even well beyond what a GPT can do.
Cool. Thank you, Alex. Let's show some of the things that folks might do with this.
Cool. So I prepared all this stuff so we don't have to wait for it to spin. So we have to wait for it to spin and load. Okay. So this is going to be that out, and we'll come back to that. Okay. So this is all synthetic. I'm an IT guy. I don't do this stuff for a living, but as a kind of show off. So fake company, Summit Safety Supply, will say that Summit Safety Supply is looking at opening a new warehouse facility in the southeast somewhere. Had a couple different options. I had it build a kind of fake company financials overview into an Excel sheet, and then I attached it here. And then sorry, let me take a step back. So I started this in the new chat area. So I just hit new chat, and then I attached that document. I had used Copilot to build me this prompt to use, because I'm not going to understand like a third of the words here with how finance specific it gets. But I gave it an overview of what I wanted, which is to use the attached workbook for the Summit Safety Supply data. And then I wanted an in-depth assessment of the U.S., basically the industry that Summit Safety Supply works in. And then I gave it specifics on what to focus on there, and then how I wanted it to specifically behave. Again, these things they're overeager toddlers. I'm sure a lot of us have heard the term hallucination. They can make up data in the goal of answering your question. So it's very important to make sure it's grounded on actual data and not just trust what it says. A lot of times, especially with like hard data and hard facts, you have to just be very careful in kind of figuring out if it seems like it pulled that from a source, which it will provide references with most of these tools, so you can pretty easily see that, or if it just doesn't sound right kind of thing. That's one of the issues of pushing outside of your, I'm going to say pushing too far outside your area of expertise. You kind of lose that, like, warning flag detector if you're not familiar with that kind of stuff. So these things work best in the hands of people who have some familiarity with what they're doing. But I was using the researcher agent for this first one. And then the nice thing with agents and chats is you can tag them in a chat. So because I did that new chat one, all I did was come in here, I hit @ and then I tagged researcher, hit enter, and then I sent this first message to researcher. Cool.
And Alex, what's researcher?
Oh, yes, sorry. So the default chat can do web search, where it goes off, searches a couple websites, returns data. Researcher does a super in-depth research, basically, across both public-facing website data as well as your internal data. So this can reason over your entire OneDrive and SharePoint extremely in-depth. Again, the default one can do all that stuff too, but it usually does 5 searches and then pulls the data back. Researcher goes off and searches for 5 to 20 minutes and pulls in hundreds of things and then synthesizes it in the one large output. As you can see at the bottom, it gives me an option of choosing my report length, 1.5 or 5+. So it lets you do a lot of that very in-depth data collection stuff in a
very
synthetic
way. Yeah.
In a non-synthetic example of me using this in my day-to-day, I had a project to replace one of the pieces of software we use because it was missing a feature we wanted. And I just kicked off researcher to go look at the market. I knew a couple pieces in the market that I was going to look at, but I was curious if there was anyone else. And honestly, the platform we were replacing was it was on the lower end of importance, but it was getting irritating So I didn't want to spend a lot of time on it, but I just kicked off a quick researcher thing, and it pulled a couple competitors I didn't even know existed in the industry with a full rundown and everything.
Yeah.
So we can save a lot of time even on those like low value tasks.
And this is so this is an agent that's available right out of the box. Like there's nothing you need to do, right?
Yep.
It's available.
Yeah, this is one of those made by Microsoft ones
Yep.
that you can go in the agents, and then because I already have it added. Oh wait, it did show up here. Yeah, researcher right
Yep.
there. I'm also going to show off analyst. Cool. Okay, so it asked me some follow-up questions, and then I just answered the questions. You don't have to be specific. You can be specific. I usually just go with pretty quick answers to its questions to get specific stuff out. And then it went off, did 20 minutes or so of research there, and then spit out this gigantic report. Tons of data. We don't have to go through the whole thing. You can see it kind of bugged out on letting me actually click it, but it did put in references for the data it pulled, and then all the references should be stored under the sources button here. And then I can come through and find its citations. It always hates me on live demos and the links don't show up when I'm doing these for some freaking reason. But usually these are clickable, so you don't have to like dig through these and guess. But you can see that it actually referenced all the real data on it. And then you can kind of look through it all and then go from there. Again, we won't go through it all because it's a lot and it really isn't matter because it's synthetic, but that's the idea. So then I decided to take all this and chain it together with this was another researcher call. I told it to grab the previous market assessment and then the workbook again, and then evaluate 3 specific locations as potential locations for a new distribution center launching next year. Gave it an overview on what the research and compare for that, as well as some further instructions to give it. It asked again some follow-up questions like, do we want to lease the facility or build it? Yada, yada. Again, I just gave it a quick answer. It went out 20 minutes again, gave me a very in-depth overview. This includes reviewing the data for the existing locations we were running that were in that Excel sheet, as well as a number of other things, and then public data and all that stuff to see what makes sense for us to actually expanding and focusing on, and then it also included some stuff on where we are hurting currently with our current locations and why we shouldn't focus on expanding those and just focus on tuning those up kind of stuff. Again, very long report, and I honestly I look over these more so if I'm going outside of my specialty, but I usually just give it a quick skim over, make sure everything looks right, nothing's too crazy. Again, it's partially about the total impact of these things. This would be a higher risk thing to just skim and then miss something important on. If it's lower risk, you can kind of just look it over, give it a quick once over, and make sure it all looks good and checks out, and then go into the next important part, which was, didn't pull up. Let me refresh.
Well, Alex, while you're refreshing, just for folks to understand, it doesn't have to be like a major research project, right, in order to use this tool. I mean, we use it for market research, product research, if you want to do a competitive analysis, if that's part of your job, if you're in sales and you want to find, specific demographics that you want to target from that perspective. I mean, you can use it for pretty much anything. And you can ask it for any kind of output, what kind of format. So what careabout's really kind of what you're looking for. You can steer it in a lot of different ways. So a lot of flexibility. And I love the fact that it's out of the box. It's one of the things. This and Analyst is something that you can get a lot of use out of from day one.
Yep. Like pretty much all my searching tasks where I'm looking into stuff like Phil mentioned, I just jump in the researcher right away and then kick it off. Usually while it runs, I'll go off and do some of my own searching to kind of ground myself too. But again, very powerful doing that. And then, except when it freezes up on me when I'm trying to show it off, which is the only time this ever happens. There we go. Okay. Oh, that's why it's freezing up. Okay. So my next thing I had done was basically take all this researcher data, and then I wanted to go present it to the CFO. We'll say I tagged the PowerPoint agent here, and then again, let's just at PowerPoint, and then I had it use all that data to come in here and build out a kind of presentation. No, honestly, I didn't give it that much. This is kind of the issue of having someone who's not a specialist in this trying to do this. I didn't give it probably as much grounding as it needed. I just used a Copilot generated prompt that helped me understand it. But it went in, took all that data I had pulled, and then built me this quick presentation that I could do in front of our CFO or whatever, whoever the relevant person is for what you're doing. Built out all of my pretty charts, data, findings, the key risks, all that stuff. So you can very quickly get the stuff together, and then it also pulls the references that it used at the end of the slides and whatnot. But this includes like not just PowerPoint. You can also do Word, Excel, quite a few other agents. Anything that has the Office agents. You can also get it to go into a straight Markdown file or a lot of other things. So you can go pretty advanced with this. And then the one
Alex,
other thing
I'm sorry. I was going to say, while you're here on the PowerPoint piece, one of the questions that we always get is, historically, it's been very difficult to get it under your own branding. Can you just chat how maybe that's changed in the past 3-6 months?
Yeah. So I don't break that one. And you're asking a hard question because I don't remember where they just moved the button to. Oh, great.
Oh, I would say you could just chat about it, but that's totally fine.
Yeah. So there's two different routes you can take. There's the classic Microsoft branding library, which is part of SharePoint. You can set one of those up, and then Copilot, including the PowerPoint and Word Copilots and all that stuff, can pull from your brand kit library, and it will automatically have like any PowerPoint templates, any Word templates, any kind of like styles and logos and that kind of stuff. That one is more advanced for setting up. I shouldn't say advanced. That one's more of a pain to set up. It can go quite a bit further, but it again is irritating to set up and maintain. So Microsoft, under the 9 dots here, added a create, 9 dots create, and then brand templates and brand kits. And that just lets you, it's actually gotten even easier since I built ours. But you can just add a brand kit, and then you can upload your logos, any of your templates, fonts, colors, anything that's relevant for your company's branding that's covered by this. And then you can also add a brand voice so that it generates content according to the brand voice, because you can have multiple of these brand templates. You could have like an internal brand voice and an external brand voice. So there, you can push this pretty far. You can also leave this out. The other really nice thing, I haven't tested it again because they added this like a week after I finished building ours. If you have a existing brand guideline, especially with all this stuff already in it, you can literally just upload a PDF of it, and then it will auto build as much of this as it can from that. So it is very easy to get going, and then you just publish it out to the whole company, or you can have your own personal brand kits. So there's organizational, and then I don't have a personal one, but you can have your own.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. I just know that was always a question and always kind of a roadblock, right? It can build presentations, but then you got to take it and then apply your brand, your brand kit to it. So this is a nice upgrade for it.
Yep. Cool. And I know the one other thing you wanted me to show off, Phil, was the Excel one. Let me get that pulled up here.
And just a reminder, if you have questions, you can raise your hand or throw them in the chat as we're going through this, please. If there's anything you'd like to see or specific use cases you're thinking about, I'm happy to chat about those.
Yep. So again, this is all synthetic data for the company I made up for the researcher report, all the payroll, yada 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 yada. But one of the questions I basically threw at it was to analyze 3 of these sheets and then give us basically the issues where our problems are, what we need to focus on, that kind of stuff. And then it came in and generated this Excel sheet for me, pulled in all the data off of the various ones, and gave me an overview to look over essentially here on what's going on for the company's finances and what we need to focus on. We had a lot of recent hiring in advance of our new expansion, as well as some of our locations are not doing hot, like the Northeast Revenue location has lost a lot of customers recently, and then the Southeast one, we have a pretty high discount in comparison to our other locations because we're trying to pull market in, but we might want to look at that, and et cetera, et cetera. And all that was me throwing this one prompt in here under the Copilot interface, little Copilot button in the top right that doesn't show up because I already have it open. It just did this, worked for a little bit, chunked through what it needed to do, and then gave me it in here, but then also went in and built out the sheet here. You can also have it build like all that analyzed data here. Back to the... Man, again, it's hating me on this demo. It worked 5 minutes before we started. Yeah, the analyze data one lets you like quickly make pivot tables, charts, that kind of stuff. So you can just hit it. It'll look over the sheet or the entire workbook and then give suggestions on what to spit out. Or those are auto suggestions if you want to just have it do something on it. Or if you want to do a specific thing, that's when you just pop up this little Copilot button here and tell it what you want. And then it will go in and do that. You can set it to allow editing, plan, or chat only. Allow editing. Let's do editing, change things, whatever it wants. Plan if you're going to do something in depth or you want to be careful before it goes in and edits anything. You can talk it over, have it do that, and then let it do allow editing. Or if you just want to discuss the data, you can do chat only, and then that puts it in a read only state. And those again are available in all of the Office Copilots as well.
Alex, here's a quick question that came in just to walk through permissions in there. I don't know if you can see the question there, but if permissions need to, it sounds like it explicitly be given to connect Copilot to Outlook for Copilot to see emails. Some of it is just inherent on what the user has access to once the Copilot subscription is applied, right?
Yep. So you don't have to do, assuming you're using, Copilot in a Microsoft 365 business tenant, so commercial, GCC, academic, any of those. Right when you provision the licenses, that's available out of the box. There is, if it's the first license going into the tenant, there is like a 48-hour delay while it builds the Copilot search index. But other than that, you don't have to set up any additional, and that index builds automatically. It just takes time once the first license gets provisioned. Outside of that, all stuff it has access to is inherent from your user account. So your own Outlook email, Copilot has access by default to everything in there. Anything in SharePoint, anything in OneDrive, almost anything in Microsoft 365. If you have access to it, it can get to it in some way. From a security and data perspective, the Copilot stuff, as long as you're on the business one, it falls under your enterprise data agreement, so it's perfectly secure. I do recommend thinking long term about like implementing the purview data controls, kind of around DLP sensitivity labels, and then some of the other things in the ESPM suite to control how people can potentially leak data using Copilot. That's just because, especially as you get in this era of letting agents go off and do things on their own, there is some risk there. Microsoft is very big on safety tuning these things, so I have never seen it do that accidentally so far, but the risk is there, and better to get the tackle that in advance. When I say risk, there, it can be like you tell it to, look over an email, and then in the same chat, you tell it to go look at something on a website or fill out a form or something through a connector, and you accidentally did it in the same chat. It has access to all that data that you were talking about with the email, and it might pull that and then throw that in the other system. So you might want to, that's what that like purview controls can help stop and control where your internal data is allowed to go as far into external or third-party systems.
Yeah, Alex, that's a really good point too. And I think one of the things to kind of share with the group is that there is a recommended kind of approach and conversation around data governance around all this, making sure that you've curated data the right way, and you have, if you're using SharePoint as one of your data sources, that it's architected correctly and things are cleaned up, but the access controls are indeed a really important part of it. Because it does automatically have everything that you have access to, and maybe controls and permissions and labels weren't ever set up correctly, right? So there may be some things that your organization doesn't want every user to see, kind of thing. So there's a whole process and framework around that. That could be that could easily be another topic for conversation as well. But just know that there is some thought that should likely go into these things before you just deploy them.
Yep. Gregory has a good question. So when an agent is built that references a purchasing manual, like in the example, can a user who does not have access to that manual use the agent? Yes, when you, this gets a little messy, but when you share an agent, it generally shares the knowledge sources with it. So that is something to be aware of. Part of that is in how you're architecting it. As a general rule, I recommend not, if you're sharing out an agent, making sure that you're putting that document in a SharePoint library to use, just because while it will let them get access to that knowledge source, when you share the agent, it gets really confusing and messy from that perspective. So it's just a building kind of discipline perspective with agents. The other thing I always like to mention is the agent builder I showed off today is the personal agent builder. You are able to share those agents out with other people in the organization. I generally don't recommend doing that unless it's for kind of like a proof of concept or testing style thing. If you're sharing if you have an agent that's going to be used by multiple people in the organization, that's where you start using Copilot Studio, which is meant for that use case, and it has more advanced stuff around all that. It's not that big a difference to start. It's just a matter of making sure that you're got a good governance framework around the agents, because those personal agents are owned by a specific person instead of the organization, and it just becomes a mess. Again, Copilot Studio is like a big platform, but you can also just quickly copy those agents into Copilot Studio and then share them out with other people.
Awesome. Thanks, Alex. So we have about 7 minutes left. We can open it up for questions. And then also, while those are coming in, for those who aren't familiar with Infused Innovations, I didn't say this at the beginning, but we are a consulting organization, a Microsoft partner, and we work with organizations who are trying to understand what's possible with the ever-changing emerging technology landscape coming out of Microsoft, and more generally speaking, the industry. We can help organizations figure out, what a governance program looks like, understand where some of the use cases might be found, how to determine ROI, and then how to implement some of these things. We have a really strong background, as Alex may have alluded to, in cybersecurity. Is kind of what we started out with Microsoft. We have folks on staff that are really good with big data, and we've been doing a lot of work with Microsoft in the AI space since pretty much 2019. So we've seen the evolution over the course of time, and work with organizations. We're trying to just figure out, what do I do with it? How does it fit my business, and how can we help? Kirsten had a question here. Let me pull it up here. Ideas, capabilities to use Copilot with automation, Power Automate. That could be our next session, Alex, because that I think leads into the Copilot Studio side of things. Yeah. Do you want to just chat about that and what that brings to the table?
Yeah. So you can use Copilot with Power Automate to some extent, have it call flows, but there's a specific Sorry, one second. There's a specific like Copilot Flow platform within Copilot Studio that's more built for that use case. It gets really fuzzy on what tool to use where. Generally, you want to use Power Automate or Copilot Flows where you want deterministic things as part of your Copilot stuff. An example of where I did that with us was we do, we build contracts, proposals, that kind of stuff, usually around a certain like amount of hours or whatever. And we always have our scoping calls with clients and whatnot, and then we have to take that, turn it into a proposal with a description of what they said in the call, how many hours we think it's going to take, and a breakdown of the tasks. I built a Copilot Studio bot that had a flow behind it, whose job was identifying all those points from a meeting transcript and then putting that in pre-established fields in a Word template. So all we had to do after a meeting was say, hey, fill out a new proposal from blah, 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 scoping call, and then it would automatically go in, use AI to analyze the transcripts, but then use the flow to deterministically fill out the Word template.
Yeah. And Kirsten, I know we had done some work with you more on the custom development side, with some of the work that you guys do, but some of the things, frankly, we're talking to organizations now where even a year ago we had, at least proposed a custom build approach that now can be done with Copilot Studio and workflow automation on the back end of it. So things have changed. And that's what I mean when these things are changing so fast. The opportunities to ideate and the other thing too is to test and validate ideas, right? It doesn't take a whole lot like to get into Copilot Studio and to start building and toying around with some things to see if you can, have measurable impact in the organization across a specific job or workflow as well. So happy to chat more about that in the specifics in the future if you want, Kirsten.
Yeah, thank you. I was just curious, and I'll mention really quick, I know one of the departments here used that scenario to summarize all of the emails to their departmental email box and send them an email every Monday morning, summarizing it and assigning it to the staff in the office. So that was just an interesting use case, I guess.
Yeah, it's almost like if you can dream it, you can do it, Alex.
Yeah. Yeah, we used to have one. It ended up being a little noisy with our team structure, but we had a bot that did a weekly summary of all of our clients' Teams channels. We need to rebuild it as a roundup bot, but it was pretty handy of just like seeing what was going on in a glance week over week.
Oh, this is an interesting one. All right, Greg's going with the philosophical question here. How do you feel about employees in your organization wrapping their head around the use of Copilot? Some will thrive, but I feel as though many others review the process as producing an output that they're looking for just as complex as doing the process manually. I think that's where, and this is my, Alex, feel free to chime in, but in terms of when I'm working with organizations, I think that's part of determining where the right use cases are going to be for these things. I know a lot of times where there is a lot of pressure, whether it's coming from the CEO or someone else in the organization, say, hey, look, we've got to be doing something with AI. And it's easy to jump right into the tool set. Our recommendation is always to kind of take a step back and really understand what it is you're trying to influence in your organization, and then determine whether AI is the answer. It could be a simple workflow automation component. It could be other things that maybe, are going to provide more deterministic outputs and things like that. So there are a lot of tools in the toolbox, I think, but understanding exactly what you're trying to influence and whether AI is the right answer, because it's not the right answer for everything, is kind of important to that. And I think even the world of work has changed a little bit, and Alex and I think are pretty are deeply ingrained in using AI on a regular basis. You become an orchestrator and understand where your work and value of your work changes over the course of time too. So, but that's a whole different conversation.
Yeah. Another thing to say on that is, again, and this is partially a cultural thing, and then just figuring out where it slots in the organization. AI is a tool. Don't try and like force it on everyone, make it available for people, make training sessions available, and then kind of build a culture of caring how you're using it. Like I usually do like a monthly or every other month all hands meeting, Phil, where I show off how I'm using it, and then everyone else chimes in on how they're using it, and we kind of collaboratively learn that way. Some people use it way more than others. One of our guys pretty much only uses it for search because that's the only relevant thing for his job, and that's fine. He doesn't need to use it for everything else. We don't need AI for every single part of every single role. We just use it where it makes sense for each one of us.
Yeah. That's a great point. Yeah, trying to push is hard. That doesn't go very well. But if you can get, I would say, groups of folks together, or get your champions across the organization and make it kind of a ground up. Here's how I'm using it. Here's how it works for me. Definitely a good way to go. But I think we're at time, Alex. I want to thank everyone so much for participating. In the next 48 hours, you'll get a link to this. But I want to thank everyone for joining and hanging out. And Alex, thank you so much. Great job again.
Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.